Today on the Audio Hotline, I'm going to be reviewing the Behringer BX2020. And I know that other people have different ways of pronouncing Behringer. This is how I say it. If you say it a different way, that's fine. I'll link a video down in the description that's a fun little watch that talks about the employees at Behringer saying it different ways also. But today we have the cardioid condenser microphone that a lot of people will say is a clone of the Audio-Technica AT2020. And that's a pretty hard thing to deny. There are some definite similarities. In fact, I will be doing a comparison between the BX2020 and the AT2020 here in a little bit. We'll start talking about this microphone here in a minute, but first, let's get mic'd. Welcome all audio nerds to the Audio Hotline, and as I said before, we have the Behringer BX2020 in the studio. When I saw that this microphone was coming out, I was very excited about it because a lot of people have a lot of love for the AT2020. I did a comparison a little while ago that did include the AT2020, and I thought that it was a good microphone for the price. But after doing that video, I kind of used it a few more times, and honestly, I will say that my like for it actually declined a little bit. So when I saw that the BX2020 was coming out at essentially $40 cheaper, yeah, $59. That seemed a lot more appealing to me because if this is somewhat of a clone and it pulls off what the $100 AT2020 can do, then that would be awesome because that's a 40% savings for the same sound. And I will say, looking at the spec sheet of the BX2020 compared to the AT2020, they're very similar. But we'll talk about all that here shortly. One real quick disclaimer. Behringer did in fact send me this microphone to review. However, they have no say in what I say in this video. This is in fact my own opinion. This video is not sponsored by Behringer. They just simply sent me the microphone. And just one more thing, I am recording the BX2020 into the Motu M2, which is connected to my MacBook Pro, which is using Logic Pro X. And I currently have phantom power engaged, since you do need phantom power with this microphone, and it is recording at plus 26 decibels. But now that we've gotten all the little silly stuff out of the way, now let's go ahead and talk about what comes with this $59 microphone. When you purchase the Behringer BX2020, it will come with a slightly padded storage bag. It will come with a microphone mount that does in fact come with a microphone stand adapter. It will come with some documentation and of course the microphone itself, the Behringer BX2020. Now when it comes to the accessories included with this, they all do feel really good. The storage bag does have a little bit of padding and it's definitely pretty. The microphone mount is also really similar to what Audio-Technica gives you. It is really nice. These are actually some of my favorite microphone mounts. But I definitely do prefer a shock mount, but considering this is a $60 condenser microphone, I get why they couldn't include that without, taking away from some of the quality of the microphone. And speaking of quality, the build quality of the microphone itself is absolutely great. It feels like an AT2020, which AT2020s are built really well. This is even a little bit more compact. It's actually a decent amount smaller, but the build is great. But now that we've talked about what comes with this microphone, now let's go ahead and talk about what comes in the microphone. Let's go ahead and nerd out with some specs. The Behringer BX2020 is a cardioid condenser microphone that does in fact require 48 volts of phantom power. This has a frequency response of 20 Hz to 20 kHz, an impedance of 100 ohms, and a sensitivity of -37 decibels. This also includes a max SPL of 144 decibels and a noise floor level of 20 dBA. The BX2020 does feature a gold-sputtered low-mass diaphragm. This is also a pressure gradient transducer with a shock-mounted capsule. And just for clarification's sake, this is not a USB microphone. This does have an XLR output connection. Looking at the frequency response graph, it does have a relatively rolled-off low end, and it does have several boosts in the high end. Now, as I stated before, the specs are pretty similar to the AT2020. And here in a little bit, once I get the AT2020 into the studio, I'll put up on the screen these specs just so you can compare the two. Now, looking at the specs, though, I don't see anything that looks awful. I will say that the low end in the frequency response graph is a little bit scary. It seems like I want a little bit more there. But overall, the specs seem comparable to the $100 AT2020. But now that we went through the basics and we went through the specs, now let's go ahead and run some tests on the BX2020. While I do these tests, I will have all the information that you need to know down in the lower third of this video. Now let's go ahead and kick it off with a proximity effect test. If you get really close to the BX2020 with no pop filter on, here's how it's going to sound. Now if you just get right up on that pop filter and smell all your bad breath, here's how it's going to sound. This next part, I assure you, is going to be loud. Let's do some plosives. Peter Parker picked a patch of pickled peanutses. 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 Now if you're going to be typing on some MX Cherry Blues or something super loud directly behind the microphone, here's how it's going to sound. Now I'm going to do an additional polar pattern test with some white noise. Now if you want to get a microphone and you don't want it to be in your camera shot, here's how this microphone would sound about 3 feet away. Now, if you're planning on doing a podcast or voiceover with this microphone and you're going to put post-processing on it, here's how it could sound with some EQ, compression, maybe a de-esser. I'll label whatever I use down in the lower third of the video. Now, here's just another real quick example of the same post-processing, but without the pop filter in place. Once I got the AT2020 in the mail, it had been a while since I opened one, and I realized just how similar even the packaging is to the BX2020. Let me just show you this real quick. These are the boxes right here, basically the same size and everything. And if we open them up, literally has the same little piece of foam, the documentation right there, everything is identical. And then when you take that off, literally the inside of the boxes are the same. Both of these storage bags are really nice. And initially when I felt the Behringer storage bag, I thought that the Audio-Technica had more padding in it. But that's not the case. They both feel identical. The microphone mounts look the same, feel the same, and the microphones look very similar. The only difference here is that the Audio-Technica is just slightly larger. Now, I just wanted to show you this just to reiterate how much of a clone the BX2020 is to the Audio-Technica AT2020. So right now, I'm just using a different microphone than what's going to be in the comparison, just so you have a little palate cleanser, some sorbet, some apple slices, something to cleanse that, just cleanse the ear holes. The way we're going to do this comparison is just between two microphones, the BX2020 and the AT2020. So there will just be a mic 1 and a mic 2. You can comment down below if you want to guess which one is which before I reveal it. But let's go ahead and start the blind test. And now we are kicking off the blind test with microphone number 1. It is going into the Mo2 M2 at plus 26 decibels of gain. And currently on microphone number 1, I am not recording with a pop filter. And now here is the sound of microphone number 2, also going into the Mo2 M2 at plus 26 decibels of gain. Yes, they are set at the exact same gain level. And there is also no pop filter being used right now. Once again, here is the sound of microphone number 1 in the blind comparison. And once again, here is the sound of microphone number 2 in the blind comparison. And now we do have a little bit of protection up. I am using a pop filter now, and here is the sound of microphone number 1. I have the pop filter up, and here is the sound of microphone number 2. Here is me starting 2 feet away from microphone number 1 and getting up close to it. And now I'm close to microphone number 2 and getting further away from it. Here's microphone number 1 with just a couple plosives, pickled peanuts. And here's microphone number 2 with just a couple plosives, pickled peanuts. And here is one final sound test for microphone number 1 with no pop filter on. And here is one final sound test for microphone number 2 with no pop filter on. Alright, so there was the blind comparison between the AT2020 and the BX2020. If you want to guess which one was which, here's your moment. Pause it. Go for it. You ready? Are you pretty confident in your answer? Huh? So microphone number 1 was the BX2020 from Behringer, which by default means that the second microphone was the Audio-Technica AT2020. And even though there are a lot of specs that are similar between these microphones, they do have a different sound. I mean, their frequency response graphs are not identical at all, so I expected that. But we'll talk about that here in a second. Let's go ahead and move on to my review of the Behringer BX2020. Now, with everything we've been over in this video, when it comes to the BX2020, there's no denying that it is a clone of the AT2020. Now, I know that people's feelings are a little bit different when it comes to microphone clones. Some people hate it when companies do it. Some people are like, the more microphones, the merrier. I tend to be somewhere in the middle a little bit. I understand when really expensive microphones get cloned. I tend to be a little bit more bugged when it's like a budget microphone that gets cloned. Now, a real quick rant, and then I'll just get past it and move on and try to ignore the fact that it's a clone of an inexpensive microphone. But one thing that bugs me a little bit about it is the fact that Behringer could have just came out with their own microphone with its own unique name. It could have been very similar to this. The packaging could have just been a little bit different. They could have made the body a little bit more round, a little more squared, or just whatever. They could have made it for the exact same amount of money and everything, and just kept the 2020 out of the name. But I understand why a business does it. The AT2020 is very popular, and Behringer is like, hey, let's ride that wave. And honestly, it's probably a good business decision, but looking at it from the outside in, it feels a little cheap, but I get it. That's my little rant. Now we can move on. Bottom line, if I leave the name out of it and I don't think about it being an AT2020 clone, do I think this is a good microphone? For $59, yes. The build quality and what comes with it and everything for $59 is very impressive. When it comes to sound, maybe there are a couple other $60 to $70 condenser cardioid microphones out there that would give this a run for its money. But when it comes to build quality, I don't know if any of those could beat this. For $59, I think this is a very solid option. Now, one thing I will say about this microphone versus the AT2020 is that this microphone is substantially less harsh. Now, you could argue that it doesn't have as much clarity, but honestly, it does a good job of being clear and having some clarity, but not being too harsh. Now, my biggest problem area with this microphone is in kind of the bass region. I just don't feel like this is a very full sounding microphone. But it still sounds good, and because it isn't like too full and bassy, it does a decent job with plosives. Definitely a better job than the AT2020. But I do absolutely think it holds its own against the AT2020. Now, even though I did say that this has better plosive rejection than the AT2020, I would recommend using a pop filter. Right now I have this microphone angled and I'm, kind of trying to keep my air away from it. But if I was to sit my little tushy right in front of this microphone and be like, butts, penises, it's not sounding great. Now, it does a pretty good job compared to some other condenser microphones, but I think that some protection could be very useful. Now, like a lot of other condenser microphones and cardioid condenser microphones, I would say to use them in a good sounding room or a treated room. Now, I will say that I really do like this little carrying storage bag. I think it's really nice. It has some padding in it that makes me feel a little bit more comfortable about having it in my closet. It doesn't have enough padding for me to put this in like a compromising situation, but as long as it's safely put in your closet or maybe in a backpack where it has its own dedicated area, I'd feel comfortable about it. Now, I did say this earlier in the video, but it would really be nice to have a shock mount. But I do also like these a lot because it's easy to get the microphone wherever you need it to be. but it just doesn't have that shock rejection that you want with a condenser microphone, or any microphone for that matter. Now, one thing I am very fond of compared to the AT2020 is the size of the BX2020. It is notably smaller, which I don't have a problem with. I think that's nice. In all reality, a lot of the things that I mentioned about this microphone have been good things and not bad things. Now, as I said before, I'm not the biggest fan of clone microphones that were cloned from something that wasn't expensive to begin with. But also, I do understand that angle, and I mean, I was interested enough in it to want to review it, so obviously it's working. I don't know. It's working. But aside from that, I would have liked to see the noise floor a little bit lower than 20 dBA, and I would have liked it to be a little bit more full. But honestly, aside from just a couple things, the main note here is that this is a $59 microphone, and honestly, I think a lot of people could be happy with it. But if you were to buy the BX2020 and you could find a Behringer UM2, a lot of places are sold out, but if you could find that, it'd be like $100 for both of those. A good sounding microphone and a decent audio interface. That's the price of the AT2020. Even if you do feel like the AT2020 is better, you've got to ask yourself, is it worth 40% more? Does it sound 40% better? I do think that you could get the BX2020, maybe add a little bit in the low end, add a little bit of fullness. It would sound great. But overall, I do think this is a solid microphone, and the grade that I give the Behringer BX2020 is a B. Behringer BX2020 Bronson Blue, grade of a B. It just felt appropriate. King bee and worker bee over there too. A lot of bees, a lot of Beyoncés. But thank you all very much for watching this review of the Behringer BX2020, and a big thank you to Behringer for sending this microphone over. Stay tuned for a lot more reviews, and I will have some more Behringer microphones coming up. A big thank you to everyone that subscribes to this channel, and a big thank you to everyone that's a member of this channel. And once again, thank you all for watching the Audio Hotline. I'll see you audio nerds next time.